Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kyle Witzigman, a part of the communications team at Fulbright University, Vietnam. Today, we are joined by Mr. Jack Tate, a philanthropist who is sponsoring Fulbright Everest Launchpad, a collaborative, pioneering initiative between Fulbright University, Vietnam and Everest Education. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Tate.
I'm glad to be here.
When did you first move to Vietnam, and why did you decide to?
Well, the reason I originally came to Vietnam was because a Viet Kieu girlfriend of mine that I met in America, unfortunately, on the first day of February, year 2000, she died in an automobile accident when I was out of town. And I came to Vietnam to share the grief with the family of her death. Her name was Kelly, that's what she called herself. And after time went by, I kept coming back and forth to Vietnam, and her mother and 4 sisters asked me to become the eldest son of the family, which touched my heart. And over time, and I just decided that I'd like to live here, starting in 2002. So for 15 years, I've lived in Vietnam.
How did you first hear about Fulbright University, Vietnam, and what intrigued you about it?
Well, I first heard about it in regard to, I saw a few little blurbs in the paper. I read the English press here, but also BJ happens to know a fellow named Bob Schiffer, and she mentioned that Fulbright was starting up and they were interested in meeting people like me who had some money they wouldn't mind giving away.
What about Fulbright University, Vietnam's missions and goals resonated with you, connected with you?
Well, what really is important to me about Fulbright is that right now what happens is the most successful families in Vietnam are educating their children primarily in international schools or bilingual schools with the expectation that these children will leave Vietnam and be educated primarily in America. And I think a lot of the parents really don't expect them to come home. I think they expect they'll be successful there somehow, maybe get married, maybe even invite the parents to come live there someday. This kind of dream, I would like to see reversed. I would like to see people proud of Vietnam, educated in Vietnam, staying in Vietnam, but in order to do that, they have to have an international quality English-based university such as Fulbright in order to have the parents change the location of the dream.
Exactly. So, unfortunately, some parents of students who were selected in the final 40 refused to allow their children to come. They were afraid, why would someone give so much money for no end of their own? What do you have to say to them? Well,
I've been in the habit of doing this for about 20 years now, and I've given away over $25 million, and I haven't asked for any favors yet. So it's kind of something I'm quite used to. However, a better understanding would be the real motivation that I focus my energies on Vietnam. The reason I focus on Vietnam is that when I fell in love with this Vietnamese girl in America, she was still very upset with Vietnam because her family had fought for the Americans. But that caused me to start researching a lot about the war, and the more that I researched the war, the more happy I was that Vietnam won the war. And where she didn't like Ho Chi Minh, I thought he was the greatest leader I'd ever read about. And gradually there occurred inside of me a new kind of destiny drive. I had developed a large chain of stores called Baby Superstores, which is now known as Babies R Us, and built it into a company that 20 years ago was doing $500 million in sales. But you know, I decided that that company got so big, it just wasn't right for me. I had over 3,000 employees. And so I decided to sell that company to Toys R Us. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But after I fell in love with Kelly, and unfortunately she died, something happened in me that I called a new destiny. And that destiny I call love bomb. And you say, what is a love bomb? Well, a love bomb is where when you get bombed by one of these things, you say, bomb me more. I want some more of those love bombs. In other words, the Americans were over here fighting in the American war, and they were harming and killing Vietnamese, dropping hate bombs. I'm just one person, but I've dedicated my life to bringing love bombs to Vietnam. And my way of saying I'm profoundly sorry for what Americans did here, and I want to do the opposite. You know, people in the war, they weren't so shocked they got bombed, they knew that's what happens in a war. So people have more trouble understanding why something good happens. It's hard for them to accept a love bomb, a hate bomb. You know, they say, well, that's just what happens when you're in a war.
In your work here regarding poverty reduction, regarding healthcare, what projects have you been involved in, as well as what are their outcomes?
Primarily, I've focused on health, and particularly on children and on poverty. For example, right now I'm funding the Ki Quang Pagoda, or what you would call a Chua temple, that takes care of over 200 children in Saigon. And also I have helped another one in Ben Yung province that has about 330 children. And I'm focusing a lot of energies on Dalat, where I have 3 more of these type of, they call them McCoy, like orphanages. And right now I'm supporting about 700 students in those. And there's really thousands of things. You know, I have over 200 people that have Western medicine every month because of things I'm doing. It's just a great variety of types of things. Usually I don't even talk about it, I just do it.
When you look at the state of education in Vietnam, particularly the rural areas, what do you notice? What do you hope changes?
Well, the main thing I would like to see is for the parents that are most successful to, at a minimum, have their children educated in bilingual Vietnamese and English. To me, it's just amazing to see children going to school in a foreign language, both in reading, writing, and speaking, and actually being able to read and write a foreign language better than their native language. I really would like to see Vietnamese, yes, have excellent English skills, but I want Vietnamese to be proud of their own language and their own culture, which I think is one of the greatest in the world.
Since you've lived here since 2002, I kind of have more of a personal question. It's not about the university or education. What is your favorite Vietnamese dish?
Oh, I know what that is. It's, it's a souped up version of pho gai, and let me explain what I do for breakfast essentially every morning. And I think I may be the only one doing this in Vietnam. I order pho gai, and then I take all the chicken out because I don't want to eat too much meat in the morning. And then I add the equivalent of a whole head of garlic, which I've been soaking in apple cider vinegar and cutting it. I mean, a head, that's like 8 or more cloves. And then I add on top of that all kinds of lettuce and salads and vegetables, well, not vegetables, leafy green vegetables, so that the top 1.5 inches or so is solid, that underneath is this garlic, and then that is what I eat almost every single day, and I think that's really good for my health. Nobody else can stand eating what I eat, but I've gotten used to it, and I love it.
Delicious.
Really?
I will try it, maybe.
I hope you don't throw up. I really like it.